Welcome, folks, to the Game Changing Work Show with myself, Veronica Stewart, and Roxana Radulescu over there. Now, today we're going to be talking about the top science based strategies to minimize change resistance. Now, we know neuroscience has been used through the years in organizations, and it's increasingly growing with the help of organizations like the Neuro Leadership Institute and so forth. But here's the thing, there's so much more to science that we actually can use to help organizations grow and evolve into the organizations for the future. And so today, come join Roxana and myself as we dive into some top based science strategies that you might not have thought about to help you with change resistance. I think I did that the opposite way. This is what happens when we haven't had a show in eons.
I know, right?
I was like, wait a minute, I think I was supposed to do that first.
Like, we can put this all like I have a bug and I can write on it. So I thought, why not?
I love it. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's been a while since we had a live show. Roxanne and I have started moving from twice a month instead of every week to allow us to really kind of think about the topics and prepare for these sessions and perhaps maybe have some exciting guests, right?
Who knows? And also to allow you who are watching and who are with us to watch at any point in time. Like, you can join us live, you can catch up on the replays, and keep sending us ideas and questions, because that's what we're all about. We're here to discuss about, all of those challenging aspects that take a lot of energy and time from us, and we just want to simplify.
And those of you that might be new to the show, Game Changing Work is a show that's all about um, changing the game for the modern workplace. And so we talk about, of course, science-based approaches. We look into any new techniques and tools and the trends that are out there and focus on what we would call modern leadership today, since we know that is vital when it comes to the success of an organization, a department, or a team, in order to really create ongoing change and shape the organization that you envision. And so without further ado, let's get started on this topic. I'm pretty excited about this one. Um, and so we are sharing where a lot of you know about change management. Sometimes I don't even like using that word because we find out through studies and research when it comes to the predominant population, we're talking about 55%, I believe, or more. I think it's like a 3/4. Is that 55%? I can't even add. Where
We're talking science, not math, okay?
I know, obviously, mathematician, please come. We need you. That 5 to 7 years is the average of where most people in the population out in the world change. And so even the very word change actually causes a stress on them. And so, but we have it everywhere in our language in organizations, from organizational change leadership, change agent, you name it, right? I still use the word because that's how a lot of people relate to when it comes to that focus. But just the very word, how did most of you feel even when I said it, right? It's a stressful thing. And so today, it's really about challenging ourselves in how we're evolving the way we think about and using science. And we know about neuroscience, and we'll talk about that a little bit and around the brain and a couple of our strategies. But we're going to also end with a different probably approach that some of you might not have thought about, using physics in relation to change resistance and in creating organizational change. And so that will lead us into our upcoming special guest on the 15th of that live event show as well. So good things. If those of you that just joined us, get in the chat, Share some of your thoughts, maybe how you've been using science-based approaches today. I would love to hear from you, or any questions that you might have as we bring up some of these topics. So are we ready to get started, Roxana?
Let's get rolling.
Okay. So strategy, number one, is all about reducing the noise and uncertainty. Now, we know that if you think about neuroleadership, they had an article. We should probably drop that in our comments.
In the comments, yeah.
Oh, it was a great article that I saw today where they talked about the 4 acronyms of stickiness to help people understand science-based. Now, I use the SCARF model a lot. I'm an alumni of the Neuroleadership Institute, and that's where I became acclimated around how to use the SCARF model. And part of the SCARF models is certainty, right? It's the C in the SCARF acronym. And a lot of people don't like not knowing what's happening.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the chatter of the noise of not what's going on. And so there's a huge opportunity that we can change that paradigm. And so there's a couple of tool sets and strategies that we may or may not have thought about when it comes to using, because we maybe not thought of it being science-based, right? And here's one thing that I wanted to add before we get started in talking about it, is really the science. I thought this was kind of interesting. And I probably should put this in maybe presentation mode.
Yeah, let's make it bigger so we can see it.
Imagine that. There we go. There we go. All right. So those of you that might not be familiar, no, I don't have a degree in neuroscience, but if we need someone to come, we will. I did graduate with a science focus. So if that means anything, any of you out there, some of you love certification degrees for status recognition. But anyways, the key dopamine receptor gene, those of you may or may not be familiar, the DRD2. And I thought this was quite fascinating because this is where we get that dopamine receptor. And when we think about the SCARF model, when it takes people to a reward state, that's releasing dopamines. But here's the really a cool thing is it helps with learning and memory. It helps with working memory, cognitive flexibility, attention, motivation, right? Creativity, all of these great things. And I thought the last one was quite interesting. Emotional intelligence, especially in women, right? We got to get our dopamine released, right?
Yeah.
For that. But if we think about putting ourselves in a reward state, this kind of goes into our first thing when it comes to addressing uncertainty, which is goal setting. And we know that goal setting is something that puts people in the reward state. It actually releases what we're looking at here, this dopamine receptor. And you look at motivation, right, and sensitivity to reward. It's really kind of electrifying that.
Yeah. And I love it. I love it as I look at this, and I'm so happy that you shared this because I can see, like, thinking about it, there's the connection and the difference, right? We think about change, we get, almost all of us get that sense of fear that releases cortisol and adrenaline. So it's that we get into the fight or flight response, right? So when we just change the word from change for just the sake of change into goal setting, new beginnings, New Year resolutions, those are big right now. And when you think about it, when you think about New Year's resolutions, we're managing change, but we're creating change, and we're going with it because we change the way that we think about it, because it's a resolution, because it's something that gets us excited and that brings in the dopamine, rather than, oh my God, I'm like, if you think about it, it's going to be a new year. Who knows what the new year is going to bring? But we get excited. We don't get afraid because of the mindset and because of the words that we're using when we describe it to ourselves first.
And definitely. And part of a goal setting framework that I use is OKRs. Now, a lot of us might think of just OKRs for business strategy. Well, it's a strategic framework in itself, but it's also derived from goal setting, and that's what makes me
Mhm.
attracted to it. Now, I'm not the only one out in the world that uses it for organizational change. There are some other folks out there. There's a group called OKRs at the Center in Europe. So this isn't something that I just made up, but it's something that I utilize, and I'm utilizing it in my engagements where I use OKRs for change strategy, because OKRs is all about change in behavior. And so what are we trying to do when we're going through agile transformations and any types of transformations, right? And change management is trying to change behaviors and actions. And
Mhm.
so if we think about and looking up at that dopamine receptor, if we start with trying to figure out what our strategic vision is as part of that process, this OKR cycle, and we're creating goals, it's a natural, positive experience that's already naturally motivating people. Now, there's a
Yeah.
couple of other things that we want to consider throughout this process, like I was talking about using the SCARF model, making sure that we address all those different areas that trigger people either more on the threat or reward state, and all the other great
Mhm.
things that the neuro leadership from that article on those 4 acronyms. And so when we talk about reducing noise and uncertainty, there's a huge opportunity for us to use the neuroscience and then also a framework, a goal setting framework like OKRs for change management. Now, I'm kind of curious, those of you that are watching us today, if you have considered using OKRs for change management yourself as well.
And why? Because
Yeah.
when I first heard about OKRs, I was like, this is amazing, especially because we're talking VUCA world. So we're completely talking uncertainty long term. And what OKRs does is it actually helps you be more flexible in how you approach the goal setting and revisiting so that you can tweak as you go, so that you don't get frustrated in the middle of the road that, oh my God, we're not even going in the right direction anymore because everything has changed around us. But you didn't know because you had that big goal where you just had to go, but it didn't allow, all of the framework didn't allow you to do it. And I think this is where OKRs come in. So I'm really curious to know what gets people excited about OKRs, and if you even know about them, because I talk to a lot of people that don't know about them.
And
Like, I don't come from
no,
your agile world.
but
So
a lot of times people are using it as a thing versus really
yeah.
understanding the people dynamic when it's outcome based, if it's done
Hmm.
right, which is all about change in behavior, right?
Yeah.
And so when we think about these change in behaviors, it's what we actually need to do in change management. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing that's great when you think about the science-based approach thinking is that if you're using the OKR cycle correctly, right, and writing them to where results are happening and tracking that progress, what happens when we're actually coaching, right? Those of you that might be
Hmm.
personal life coaches or what might have you, is we want those small wins, right? Those tiny habits, right? A lot of the books, The Power of Habit, all of them that are out there talk about that you need to have those small wins and those
Yeah.
results because that's going to motivate you. And so if you're tracking this progress and going through this, you got a goal, you're tracking progressing in a positive way, you're naturally creating this momentum of moving forward and reducing that stress that we always get about when it comes to change, because it's
Yeah.
going to naturally get people to say, oh gosh, yeah, that was a little hard, but oh my, you can see I'm losing weight, right? It's all those things that we do in the new year. And when we start to feel like we're achieving it, how great that feels. Wouldn't
Yeah.
it be great that we actually feel that way in an agile transformation where 90% out there are failing today, with the numbers of change resistant is over 40%, and there's a reason why.
Yeah, you're so right. And I love that you said that, because, and I think when it comes to, because we talk about science based, don't forget the psychology of how people react to change.
Hmm.
Because we could make the best plan ever, but, and what I see, I do a lot of team coaching right now in organizations, exactly because of that, to help them understand how they can move forward, because they're frozen. And so there's a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. So, we're trying to let those go and replace them with dopamine. And how do you do that? Because, and the minute that you start to understand that some people are going to be more resistant to change, some people are going to be more reluctant, maybe not completely resistant, but more reluctant. They will need to see the tried and tested. They will need to see some results. They will need to see how it works for other people first. And then there will be these people who will be just, change, I'm in. Like, I don't need to know about it. I'm full in, and let's see what happens. And so you play with all of these dynamics, exactly, so that you get everybody more engaged. Because the thing is, change does not happen. We look at change as the process, but change is the result. Transition is the process. And if transition is not successful, it does not lead to change. It does not lead to change. It doesn't give you the result. And in this process, you have to consider exactly what you brought on the screen, collective ownership, because it doesn't work otherwise.
And as we dive into another science-based strategy in relation to maintaining collective ownership is, I want to call out what you said is it's different for everyone. Some people change at different rates. Now, I talked about the majority of the population might be in a 5 to 7, but there are some that change regularly. You and I are probably in the other part of that statistic in the population out there. And so we know that it's different. It's also different how we approach it. And we can help each other if we look at it more in a collective way. And so this goes into our second one. When it comes to the impact energy based on outcomes. And so here's a couple of things Roxana and I use the GC index, and that is based on science and organometric that measures impact energy. And you can see there, we know that we measure personality, DISC, Strength Finder, everything that's out there today. We know people's skills, right? We work on those, or people's years of experience. And those are all very important. But it's more about when we use things and how we can use them more effectively. And so when I'm thinking about how I'm creating a transformation team, or really working through how we're going to figure things out and get to action, it's all based on outcomes and how people are going to contribute. And so I love CB Teach, Shantonu's visual. I had to put it in there, and props to him. He's another GC partner, GCologist, that has some really great visuals, and he shows about cognitive behavior. So he gets into the sciences just like we do, and he shows where outcome sits. And so if you're actually trying to achieve an outcome, and you have all these different proclivities, is what we call them, and energies of how people are going to work, you can actually see if more of the energy of people are all about getting things done and implementing, and they need to understand how to do it, and they may only like the tried and true tested, to your point, then we might need to balance that with somebody like ourselves, like Game Changers, where we look at different things in a different way. We're natural change agents, and we kind of bring the energy and balance it to challenge some of those that might like more of that pragmatic approach to things. So,
Exactly. And also,
is that
what I
your
want to add
construction?
here, like, based, because like, you know me, I mean, for me it's been construction year. It's like it's never ending. Anyway, talk about change and dealing with it. So it's also about the energy that people spend, and the change that happens to them and for them, it's at different speeds. And you have to consider that, because when it comes to collective ownership, and what I always say to all of the team leaders and team managers that I worked with, it's no surprises. If you have one rule, especially in a change process, in a transition process, like, no surprises. You don't want people to be surprised. No one who's involved in it and who's affected by that change, you don't want them to get any surprises. They need to know what's happening all along. And you need to think about the fact that the way that you like to receive communication is not going to be the same way that they like to receive communication. So make sure that you keep asking, and make sure that when we talk about communication, you make your best to communicate with them, and help them understand that they need to be accountable for how they want to receive information and communication. And if they're missing something, they need to ask. Because it's nice to sit and wait for the leader or for the information to come from the top down. But if I know I need it because it helps me in the process, I need to be accountable to ask for it. Hey, by the way, I have a question. Hey, you didn't mention this. How about that? Because that's what helps us collectively own that process, individually and collectively as well.
Yeah, and I use this actually with the OKR cycle
Mhm.
in Agile Transformations, because you have the transformation team and a collective group of people where they naturally will understand how they collaborate. It also is able to touch into psychological and safety and trust, because you start to realize the people that might be more in a certain energy, their dominant energies, or energies that might be dominating the
Mhm.
conversations. Because what we do is, not only do we do the individuals, I think most people are so used to the disc and stuff because they're more individual
Yeah.
based. This actually takes an aggregate collective data that you can actually do at the team level, and you can actually see with everyone in the room together where the energies are naturally going, and then we become more aware about that. So it's actually quite amazing, and I'll probably have some more stories to tell in the future about the different scenarios when you have like a group of scrum masters
Mhm.
together. I've done it in Essential Safe for RTs, scrum masters, transformation teams, and what might have you, when they start to become aware, going, oh, everyone's dominating over here. No wonder why we do what we do, right? And
Exactly. And no
so
wonder why we're struggling in that other area, right?
So this is another science-based strategy when it comes to maintaining collective ownership. We naturally actually can see and make better decisions of what collective means to us, because now we're looking at a collective impact energy. And so energy is definitely one that you and I love to talk about, which is going to be in our next strategy number 3, which gets into our special guest for next week. And all of this, just to kind of recap, is they're all related to each other in a way. But we wanted to point them out in its own special uniqueness. Because if you are really going through a transformation or doing something really big, you can actually use all of it together in a package. That's what I use, coming out, with these accelerator programs for transformations, is you use all of this to create a great foundation. I always say, don't build things on shaky ground, right? There's a reason why we have a over 90% transformation failure rate, is because we're not building things on a solid ground, right? We're always wanting to get to action so quick. And I loved your analogy before we went on air. What did you say about being in your pajamas?
It's like wanting to go for a run in your pajamas. I mean, you have to like put some
Yeah, and
decent
most
clothes
runners
on
will put the
to
gear
go for a
on.
run. And
Don't
you
you
need
warm
to,
up?
yeah, gear, warm up, and like and get ready to, like, if you go in your pajamas, you might be running for what, 2 meters and then get back because it's
And
like,
then if
no, I'm not
you
gonna do
eat
it.
too soon, if you don't warm up, you can get a cramp, right? There's all
Well,
these
it will
things
be
that
painful.
impacts. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's no different when you're approaching a transformation. It could be a total organizational transformation. It could be within your department. And really, my rule to it is, if you're doing your department and you're starting to go in a multi-team setting, it's some kind of transformation, because now you have a collective of people that it becomes even more complicated. Is how are they all going to work together? Because it's so easy when you're in little baby scrum teams like what I work in, but when you're starting to look but beyond that, it becomes a lot more complicated. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of my golden rule, is then you need to start kind of thinking about these things, right? You need to
I
start
loved
laying that foundation.
I loved what you said about, yeah, in your little scrum teams. Yeah, okay, that goes for leadership teams as well, what do? They go and plan and discuss and strategize. Everything looks great on paper. The plan is there. We know what we need to do. How about when we roll it out to all of the other teams and to the entire organization afterwards? Because we didn't consider that, because they're surprised, because people don't know why, people don't know how, people don't know why not, and all of that kind of stuff, which we typically don't consider. Like, we work in small hubs and bubbles, and when
I find
the
this a
bubble
lot.
bursts.
And I find this a lot even in change management practices, that you have the
Yeah.
change management people working in a bubble.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
working in all the things where everything is collective ownership, and this is why it's so important. And if we really were thinking about the science of everything, in going through what is actually making people resisted to change, they're probably saying, I don't have a say in this. The process has actually been done to me. I wasn't even part of that
Yes.
decision. Can I bring any of my ideas to the table? What about my ideas? How about if I don't even believe in what we're trying to do? What's our vision? Like, where are we going? And there's so many things to add to that. And there have been change management practices that probably have worked for some, but then they spent all this time planning a communication when the communication actually should be in real time.
Yeah.
We should have learned now from all the real-time feedback, social media, and all these things that are out there today, that there's something
Yeah.
to pick about real-time feedback and real-time collaboration techniques, that forget about all that planning a communication. Why not be a little bit more transparent of what's going on, and stop trying to put it on a bow?
Yeah.
What I like about when I talk about building this foundation, and really going through using OKRs, I'm really forcing more of making them think about their to be state. What's that vision of where they want to be, and then forcing them to think about the strategy around it. That's a whole different conversation between communication plan, because if you're actually using the cycle and some of those processes, you're automatically innately bringing it in. And there's a way to actually do it that integrates with agile processes. What is going on over there?
I'm telling you,
Do you
you
think it's
don't
a
want to
joke?
know.
I think it's been happening for like a year now. And so, any of you have any things that you've been using that are science-based approaches? We would love to hear from you when it comes to creating a collective ownership. A lot of people are talking about it out there today. My ears perk up when I see it, and it makes me really excited. I think I made a post, I think it was last week, about that I went to school for science. I never really thought that I would be doing science again. I went to school to be a science teacher, and now I'm all into it again, and it's so exciting. I think that's probably why I signed up with the Neuro Leadership Institute, because I was just like, ooh, science, brains. And
Yeah,
now I'm seeing why. I didn't really clearly
exactly.
see it, when I signed up for it, and went through that program. I mean, I was interested in it because I was a science major, but I don't think it really clicked until probably this past year,
Yeah.
of how integrated it is and essential to the work even I do and you do, right? Because it's all about human behavior.
That's why I say it's all personal. Nothing is just business, because it's because, and here's the thing, change is personal to each of us. We take it personally because it affects us on so many different levels. And it affects us, and like the emotional toll that it takes on us is huge all the time, because we need to leave something behind. We need to end something so that we can start something new. We need to leave those some of the old habits and practices and maybe processes and things that we were comfortable with, and we loved them, and we learned them, and we knew them by heart, and it was easy for us to do. And now we need to change, and we need to learn something new, and that's hard to do. It's hard to give up something that I like. Well, no, you can't have it anymore, even if you like it, because it doesn't work anymore, and that's painful. And that's why, and I talk about the brain. I found this week, I don't know where I heard it. It was in a video and one of the courses that I'm in so many different courses right now. And there was somebody saying, we have actually three brains. we have the brain in our head, our heart, which is a brain, because it actually has neurons and our gut.
Yeah.
So we decide in all of our decisions, and if you think about it, a lot of our decisions are also based on how we feel about that decision,
Oh,
not how
very much
logical
so.
and rational it is, but how we feel about it.
Buying is an emotional decision.
Yes,
So if we
yes,
talk about change resistance and you're trying to get buy-in, it's the same concept as a salesman trying to get you to buy something.
yeah,
The people are not going to come along unless they're emotionally connected. That's why they talk
exactly.
about storytelling and all of these different techniques, which, by the way, they realize it in any of the TED shows that will watch, we'll talk about how it impacts the brain. So
Yeah.
it's all related to science. Now, think talking about individuals and personal and how that affects organizational energy and leadership energy. Um,
Hmm.
this is our next thing, and this is probably where it's going to get people to tilt their heads sideways because this is going to lead into our special guest.
Yeah.
Well, that noise is horrible today. Oh no, Roxana, you muted yourself. Now, I'm going to share this, but wait for it, everyone, because this is mind blowing. Because now everyone is familiar with neuroscience, but this is our seeding for our show on the 15th with our special guest to really talk about physics and kinetic energy. And so the laws of kinetic energy for organizational success. And so here are a couple of snippets, and it's a group that we partner with called Quanta, and they've developed what you're seeing here is the black box. And I love John Rattle. It's like I always like, it's like he definitely blows my mind when he talks about things, and this is why, like in Michelle, sometimes between the two of them, that's when it resonates, right? Because again, we know the different energies between the two, and I love them both dearly, and just the magnificence of what they have accomplished in thinking, taking science, evolution, really understanding human evolution, adaptation. That's where I learned about the gene, that all of us has the gene for change. It just depends on when we choose to use it, right? That's why how we adapt as humans. And so they talk about the DNA of a cultural evolution over time. And Michelle talks a lot about fractal energy. And maybe that's what we'll get her to dive into more on the 15th. And so part of this is really creating that learning cycle naturally with people, because part of adaptation is to learn, right? And you kind of go through this process of creating new habits and learning. And so how do you create this continuous feedback learning culture that has these minor, what does she call it? Minor fractals that creates change in a very seamless way. And it's quite magnificent. And so they talk about energy. And in organizations, we actually can measure the energy and the probability wave of organizations to where if they are trying to achieve a certain particular strategic intent, we can actually go and diagnose to where if you're requiring an optimization of, say, for example, of an energy of 250, but you're optimized at only 100, you have this huge gap, and your success rate is really going to be far in between by what this is. Not only can you actually show that huge gap, but you can actually pinpoint where those areas where you have low energy. And so it's quite amazing what they've done. And this is all based on physics. So,
I love this. So I can't wait to have Michelle on because it's all related. And by the way, we talk about, you know what? I did a poll. I had a webinar last week for some peeps. They're in the US actually. And we were talking about what would you like to measure in your teams? Do you want to measure behavior, personality, impact, or motivation? And they all said, I want to measure motivation. And I'm thinking, well, actually, the way that we make our best impact and contribution in our organization, that's going to be directly correlated with the level of motivation that we intrinsically have. And that's what you want from a team. And where it when it comes to energy and really diving deeper into how those levels of energy affect what results you're getting, because they affect the actions that you take and how you take them, that's awesome, because that's what you want, because it will bring you there, it will bring all of you there faster and better. And like it's all in the energy, and the energy that you put into it, it has an effect on what's happening outside of you afterwards. Oh, Michelle, you're with us. We're excited to have you too.
Yeah, and I love where you're going with this motivation and energy, because every single thing that we've introduced and talked about today is all centered around that.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
when we talk about resistance to change and how to minimize it, there's so much we can do with science, and then science complementary techniques, like I mentioned, goal setting and OKRs, because there's some science around that, right? It's a rewarding system. And so part of that, if we start to be more deliberate about the things that we use and start to see, I bet you, and again, let me say this requires the leader's participation to make this successful. Okay, this is my disclaimer. Maybe I need to have like a little thing,
Yeah.
warning, please do not use this without leaders, like trailing on the bottom here, because that's a key ingredient here. But if what we are trying to say, and I think this is so important, is there's a lot of things out there bashing leaders. You're a horrible leader. Leaders need to do this, leaders do that. But it's like, are we helping them with providing
Yeah.
the right tool sets to help them become successful? And so this is where I'm saying is there's huge opportunity to help elevate them in many different ways to be the leaders they probably want to be and probably don't know how to, with all the stresses and expectations that they have, right?
Oh my
So
God, they're huge
I
to
think,
the roof.
yeah, but they get beat up every day of
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
the bad things that they're doing. And so, yes, there might be some that may be in question. I'm not saying that everything is perfect, but what about the ones that are trying?
Mhm.
That's kind of what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
so there's a huge opportunity to show a way, a better way that makes it less painful. And that's where I love about using science-based approaches, because I believe there is a better way. We haven't been doing it right there, folks, because why is the transformation failure rate so high? And we know it, like with agile transformations, and you have all the groups even trying to use OKRs, but guess what? They're bringing the same anti-patterns to OKRs. I was just reading a book, and I'm like giggling when I was reading it. I was like, these are the same problems that Agile has. It's because the same anti patterns, right? The people side of things is moving over to
Yeah.
another process.
Yeah.
So there's something to say about focusing on the people side, folks. So
Yeah, that's,
let's
I think that's the key word here. I mean, like and that's where we've been doing kind of the same thing for so many years now, right? We're focusing on the process, and yeah, you need the process, you need the framework, you need that stuff in place, but you cannot exclude the ones who are going to execute the whole thing, because that's where your success rate is going to be either here or you're not going to see
it. So our recap here is the first strategy was reducing the noise and uncertainty, and really starting to create that transparency, putting some change strategy around, and using more of a goal setting approach, and also results where you have these tiny habits, tiny incremental changes where you can actually see the results, and there's some science behind that, right? And if we use some of the neuroscience report processes and like SCARF or what might have you, to really understand what is creating more of a reward versus threat, that's going to be helpful to reduce noise and to address those uncertainty. And there's probably a couple other things. If you have anything around here to help with that, please share with us, because we'd love to
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. And let us know, how do you, are
Science-based.
you science-based, and also like science-based, celebrate those wins, because
Yes.
we forget to do that, and they bring in so much
Dopamine, that's part of the
dopamine.
dopamine, right?
Yeah, right, gets us excited. Okay.
Now, and then also the second one was maintaining collective ownership. And so obviously we know the soft skills, the, channeling the emotions and really bringing people together, the human side of it. But there's also a science part of it where we know that if we look at the science and look at an outcome base and the energies of how people naturally want to get to action and contribute and really truly make an impact, what actually lights them up, as I call it, can naturally drive some of that collective ownership versus putting
Yeah.
a bunch of people. I'd say divergent thinking is a good thing, because if you put some of that in there, their energy actually
Oh yeah.
elevates versus having the same kind of energy.
Exactly. I mean, we talk about inclusion so much, and if people don't feel motivated, how included will they feel?
The
And the
life
other way
isn't always
around,
good,
if
right?
you don't include them in the conversation, how motivated are they going to stay?
And this is a way to find out in ways that motivate them they may not have thought of.
Yeah.
So this is a great tool to use that we talked about, that science based and organometric. You can map it to processes. You can use it for a lot of things, which goes into the second thing, which they also use the GC index, but they put some really cool things, right, Michelle? And we're going to share that on the 15th about how to increase the leadership and organizational energy. And I just love the physics part of it and the kinetic energy and these fractals and just all about the human evolution and adaptation aspect of it. It's pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to a better brain to explain this, since this is something that I feel like we're under mentorship right now, trying to understand this
Yes.
new stuff. But really excited.
And that's another thing that you want to bring into your organization. Coaching and mentoring, these are huge.
Yeah,
Huge.
definitely. And so for wrapping up today, closing up, our next show, like we talked about, is going to
Yes.
be December 15th. So we're allowing some time in between. We're not doing the every week, but we're still doing it at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9:15 Pacific Time. And so we don't have a title yet. So this is me just getting fancy about how to build high energy DNA. And so Michelle Hoffman from Quanta is going to come and be our guest. I don't know
Yeah.
if John's going to make a stop by, but he's more than welcome to. I'll let them decide, but Michelle is going to come to the party for sure. And we are going to talk about some of that cool stuff that we showed you in that black box method. Black box method. I can't even talk
Blah, blah,
today.
blah,
Blah,
blah.
blah, 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 blah. And the DNA energy. Love this stuff. So
It's amazing, because I bet I never thought about the organization energy DNA. This is huge. I mean, we hear about this a lot. Michelle says John will be there.
oh,
So awesome. We're gonna have two guests. So
be ready for your
wrapping
mind to
up.
be blown. I already
Yes.
said said that we're probably gonna have a couple of
Wow.
sessions because we're gonna have to probably break this down because
Yeah.
this is pretty game changing stuff out there. So we
Yeah.
know that we probably will have a part 1, part 2, part 3 to help it digest with everyone going into 2022. So
And answer your questions, like
yes.
bring the questions on, because you will have two brilliant minds that add to another two brilliant minds to answer some questions for you, so bring them on.
So those of you that are enjoying some new ways to think about for 2022 to really help create the organization that you want and start moving towards in the future. And there's always a better way, folks, to evolve new ways of working and new ways of thinking. And so come join us on December 15th with our special guests, Michelle Hoffman and John Rattle from Quanta, talking about how to build high energy DNA in your organizations. And thank you so much for coming. If you are in the area of YouTube and want to make sure that you see all of our shows because you miss it, yes, we're always showing in my profile and Roxana's. And we do have a Game Changing Work LinkedIn page, but you can go to our Game Changing Work YouTube channel that has a collection of all our videos there. So never fear, you will always be able to watch the replays anytime that you want. And the beauty of YouTube is you can watch it from your TV.
Ta-da.
Just like a
Binge
TV
watch.
show.
Binge watch. The Game Changing Workshop.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So everyone, thank you for coming today, and we will see you soon.